We often underestimate the power of small beginnings. We think transformation must look grand, a complete overhaul, a dramatic decision, a radical shift that changes everything overnight. But the truth is, change rarely arrives with fireworks. It comes quietly, subtly, almost invisibly in the choices we make each day. The tiny habits we build when no one is watching are what shape our future when everyone is. We live in a culture obsessed with the big moment. We admire the entrepreneur who suddenly built an empire, the athlete who instantly broke a record, the person who miraculously turned their life around. But if we could peel back the layers of their story, we'd find something far less glamorous yet infinitely more powerful: consistency. Repetition, the small, almost boring habits that compounded over time until they built something extraordinary. Every great success story is at its core a story about small steps done consistently. The tragedy is that most people never reach that point, not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they give up too soon. They expect visible results too early. They confuse the lack of immediate progress with failure. They don't realize that growth is rarely visible in the moment. It's only visible in reflection. Think about how nature operates. A seed doesn't break through the soil the moment it's planted. For days, sometimes weeks, nothing seems to happen. But beneath the surface, there's life forming, roots spreading, strength developing, potential building, and then one morning, without warning, something small but powerful emerges. That's how growth works. That's how habits work. You might not see it today. You might not even feel it tomorrow. But one day you'll look back and realize that every small decision mattered more than you thought. The problem is that our brains are wired for short-term rewards. We want to feel progress. We want to see results. And when we don't, we lose motivation. That's why people start something new with excitement and abandon it with disappointment. But here's the paradox. The people who make the biggest changes in life are the ones who learn to love the small, almost invisible victories. They understand that doing something small every day is not insignificant. It's the only path to something meaningful. Consider how a single degree of change can alter an entire trajectory. If a plane leaves Los Angeles bound for New York, but adjusts its course by just 1 degree, it won't land in New York. It'll end up hundreds of miles away, maybe in Washington, D.C., or even somewhere in the ocean. A single degree seems like nothing in the moment, but compounded over time, it completely changes the destination. That's what happens with our habits. A small daily adjustment, waking up 10 minutes earlier, reading for 5 minutes, reflecting before bed, can redirect the entire course of our life. The problem is, most people never notice the 1 degree. They don't feel the difference. They say, it's just 5 minutes, but the truth is, every day you repeat a small action, you are voting for the person you want to become. Every small habit reinforces an identity. And over time, identity becomes destiny. We often wait for the big breakthrough to begin. We tell ourselves, once I have more time, I'll start, or when I feel motivated, I'll commit. But that's not how progress works. Motivation doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. You don't get inspired and then act. You act and then inspiration follows. The smallest step in the right direction has more power than the biggest intention that never leaves the ground. The magic of small habits is that they bypass resistance. The human mind resists big changes because they feel threatening, but small changes, they slip past our mental defenses. They feel easy, manageable, harmless, and that's their strength. A 5-minute walk becomes a 10-minute walk. 10 minutes becomes a daily run. Reading 1 page turns into finishing a book. That's how transformation happens, quietly, gently, without demanding too much at once. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't brush for 2 hours once a month to maintain dental health. You brush for 2 minutes every day. It's not the intensity that matters, it's the consistency. The same rule applies to everything that shapes your life: health, relationships, mindset, career. The small things done consistently build the foundation for the big things. Small habits also create trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Every time you do what you said you would, even in the smallest way, you strengthen the belief that you are reliable, that you can count on yourself. That's what builds confidence. It's not standing in front of a mirror shouting affirmations. It's keeping small promises to yourself, one day at a time. Confidence is not built through grand gestures. It's built through small acts of self-integrity. Imagine if you woke up tomorrow and decided that every day, no matter what, you do one small thing to improve yourself. Just one. Maybe it's journaling for 5 minutes, or drinking more water, or saying thank you to someone. It might feel insignificant in isolation, but imagine doing it every day for a year. That's 365 moments of progress, and progress, no matter how small, compounds into transformation. There's a beautiful truth about small habits. They scale both ways. Positive ones lift us up, and negative ones pull us down. Skipping one workout doesn't make you unhealthy, just as one salad doesn't make you fit. But repeating that choice over time shapes the outcome. That's why awareness matters. You are always becoming something through your habits. The only question is, are you becoming who you want to be? We often underestimate what we can achieve in a year and overestimate what we can do in a week. That's why patience is so essential. The person who learns to trust the process, to value consistency over speed, eventually outlasts everyone else. Because while others chase instant results, the patient person quietly builds something permanent. There's an old saying, small hinges swing big doors. It's true. The small decisions, how you spend the first 10 minutes of your morning, what you read, who you talk to, how you respond to failure. These tiny choices open or close massive doors in your life. You might not notice their impact today, but one day they'll determine where you stand. So ask yourself, what small habit could you start today that your future self would thank you for? Maybe it's committing to reflection before sleep. Maybe it's setting your phone aside during dinner to be present. Maybe it's writing down one thing you're grateful for every morning. You don't need to overhaul your life. You just need to begin. Because beginnings don't need to be perfect. They just need to be small and consistent. We live in a world where people chase intensity, the 30-day transformation, the 10x result, the overnight success. But the truth is, sustainable change is slow. The best kind of success is built in silence, through repetition, through daily commitment. The great paradox is that when you focus on small, consistent actions, the big results take care of themselves. But when you chase big results, you often lose sight of the actions that create them. So maybe the question isn't, what big thing will I do? But what small thing will I keep doing? Because one small act done repeatedly can shift your mindset, your habits, and your life. You can't control the outcomes, but you can control your inputs. The daily habits that create those outcomes. That's where real power lies. If you ever feel stuck or overwhelmed, remember this: start small. Don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for perfect timing. Just take one small action today. Something so simple it's almost impossible not to do. Because once you start, the momentum builds. Once you start, you begin to believe. And once you believe, everything else follows. The irony is, when we finally achieve something big, we look back and realize it wasn't the big things that made the difference. It was the small things, the tiny, consistent habits we once thought didn't matter. The moments when we chose discipline over comfort, persistence over perfection, and action over excuses. That's where transformation begins, not in the leaps, but in the steps. Because the small habits you build today are the foundation for the big life you'll build tomorrow. And one day, when someone looks at your success and calls it sudden, you'll smile, because you'll know it wasn't sudden at all. It was built one tiny habit at a time. Who we are is not defined by what we say about ourselves. It's defined by what we do, and more importantly, by what we repeatedly do. Every action we take is a reflection of what we truly believe about who we are. Habits, in that sense, are not just behaviors. They are silent storytellers of our identity. When we talk about building better habits, most people think about changing their routines, waking up earlier, exercising more, eating healthier, being more productive. But the real shift doesn't happen in the doing. It happens in the becoming. You don't simply adopt a new habit. You adopt a new identity. The moment you begin to see yourself as the kind of person who does that habit, the transformation begins to stick. If you wake up every morning telling yourself, I'm trying to be healthy, it's a statement of effort, but not identity. You're still an outsider looking in, trying to adopt behaviors that don't yet feel natural. But if you shift your language to, I am a healthy person, something changes. Now your actions aren't forced, they're aligned. You're not pretending, you're embodying. The behavior becomes an expression of who you already believe yourself to be. This is why the most powerful changes come from within, not from external motivation. You can't force someone to change by giving them rules or advice. True transformation happens when the person changes how they see themselves. That's why the smallest habit, done consistently, can completely redefine your self-image. Because every time you follow through, even in a tiny way, you cast a vote for the kind of person you want to become. Imagine two people trying to quit smoking. One says, no thanks, I'm trying to quit. The other says, no thanks, I don't smoke. They're both refusing the cigarette, but the difference in identity is profound. One is still fighting an old version of themselves. The other has already become someone new. That shift from behavior to identity is what separates short-term effort from lasting change. The habits we build shape the story we tell ourselves, and the story we tell ourselves determines how we show up in the world. Most people spend their lives trying to change their actions without ever questioning the beliefs that drive them. They try to act disciplined while still believing they're lazy. They try to be confident while secretly seeing themselves as insecure. They try to be kind while still feeling unworthy of kindness themselves. But you cannot consistently act in a way that contradicts your deepest beliefs about who you are. At some point, the inner identity will pull you back. So if you want to change your life, start not by asking, what do I want to achieve, but who do I want to become? Because goals are about results, but identity is about direction. Goals give you something to aim for. Identity gives you a reason to keep going. Goals can be achieved and forgotten, but identity endures. Think about the difference between someone who says, I want to run a marathon, and someone who says, I'm a runner. The first person might reach the finish line once, check it off and stop running. The second person laces up their shoes every day because that's who they are. The first is outcome-driven, the second is identity-driven, and that difference defines longevity. When your habits align with your identity, you no longer have to rely on willpower. You don't need to push yourself to do what already feels natural. Willpower is a finite resource. It fades with time and fatigue. But identity fuels itself. When you act in alignment with who you believe yourself to be, it feels right. It feels congruent. It's no longer a struggle. It's self-expression. But here's where many people get it wrong. They wait for the identity to come before they act. They think, once I'm confident, I'll speak up more, or once I'm successful, I'll start taking myself seriously. But that's not how identity works. You don't become confident and then act confidently. You act confidently, and over time, you become confident. The habit comes first and the identity follows. You prove to yourself one small act at a time that you are becoming that person. Every small win you achieve reinforces that identity. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you're telling your subconscious mind, I can trust me. Every time you do something that aligns with your values, you strengthen that inner belief. That's how self-respect is built, not from grand declarations, but from tiny acts of integrity. And yet the opposite is equally true. Every time we break a promise to ourselves, even in small ways, we erode that trust. We tell ourselves, I can't rely on me. And the next time we try to build a new habit, our own mind resists because it remembers. It remembers the broken promises, the abandoned plans, the unfinished attempts. That's why keeping even the smallest commitments matters, because the goal isn't perfection, it's credibility with yourself. We often think that habits are external, things we do to manage our time or health. But in truth, habits are emotional. They are about the relationship you have with yourself. If you see yourself as someone who always quits, you will subconsciously find ways to quit again. But if you start proving in small ways that you are dependable, that you can show up even imperfectly, you'll begin to rewrite that narrative. Change begins with honesty. You can't build a new identity while clinging to an old story. You have to be willing to say, this is who I've been, but it's not who I have to remain. It's uncomfortable, yes, it's vulnerable. But it's also liberating, because once you stop defining yourself by your past, you give yourself permission to create a new future. There's a story of a sculptor who was asked how he created such beautiful figures from blocks of marble. He said, I just chip away everything that doesn't look like the person inside. That's what habits do for us. Every small, intentional action chips away the parts of us that no longer serve who we're becoming. Over time, what remains is something authentic, something aligned, the person we were always meant to be. Identity-based habits also create something most people never talk about: peace. When your daily actions align with your values, you feel at ease. There's no internal conflict, no constant tug of war between who you are and what you do. But when your behavior and your identity are out of sync, you live in quiet frustration. You feel that gap, that tension, even if you can't explain it. The work of alignment, of bringing what you believe, what you say, and what you do into harmony, is one of the most fulfilling things a person can experience. And the beauty is, you don't need to overhaul everything to get there. You just need to begin with one habit that reflects the person you want to be. If you want to be someone who's disciplined, make your bed every morning. If you want to be someone who's kind, give one genuine compliment each day. If you want to be someone who values growth, read one page before bed. It's not about the size of the act, it's about the statement it makes to yourself. Over time, these small acts stack, you begin to feel different, think differently, act differently, not because you forced yourself to, but because you became someone who naturally does. That's why the most successful people don't just have good habits. They have habits that reinforce who they believe they are. Their actions are simply reflections of their identity. But remember, identity is fluid. It's not something you discover, it's something you design every day through your habits. You are casting votes for the kind of person you want to be. And just like in any election, no single vote determines the outcome, but collectively they do. Each day is a ballot, each action is a choice, and over time those choices tell a story about who you truly are. So if you want to change your life, start by changing the narrative in your head. Stop saying, "I'm not that kind of person." Because the truth is, you can become any kind of person you decide to be. You can build the identity you want, one habit at a time. The question is, what identity are your current habits building right now? Because they're building something, whether you realize it or not. At the end of the day, habits are not just about productivity or success. They're about alignment. They're about creating a version of yourself that feels authentic, purposeful, and trustworthy. The smallest habit done consistently becomes a declaration of who you are becoming. And when you start living in alignment with that identity, you stop chasing change and start embodying it. The real power of small habits isn't that they change what you do, it's that they change who you believe yourself to be. Because when you believe differently, you act differently. And when you act differently, your entire life begins to change, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. We often believe that success belongs to the most talented, the most passionate, or the most inspired. We think that greatness comes from intensity, from bursts of motivation, moments of brilliance, or waves of inspiration that drive us to act. But the truth is far simpler and far less glamorous. Success does not belong to those who move the fastest. It belongs to those who refuse to stop. The world rewards consistency more than intensity. Intensity is exciting. It feels good. It makes us feel like we're doing something extraordinary. It's why people sign up for extreme workouts, radical diets, or overnight productivity challenges. But intensity fades. It burns hot and then burns out. Consistency, on the other hand, is quiet. It's not glamorous or thrilling. It's the early morning when no one's watching, the repeated effort when no one claps, the patience to keep going long after the excitement is gone. If intensity is the spark, consistency is the flame that keeps the fire alive. The problem is most people confuse the two. They chase moments of energy instead of building patterns of effort. They sprint and stop, exhausting themselves in the process. But real growth, the kind that lasts, is not built in a sprint. It's built step by step, day by day, through the discipline of showing up. There's something deeply powerful about the person who simply refuses to quit. Because consistency is not about speed, it's about endurance. It's about doing what matters even when it feels like it doesn't. Think about water cutting through rock. It's not the force of one drop that shapes the stone, it's the persistence of millions of drops over time. The same principle applies to life. You don't need to move mountains overnight. You just need to keep showing up long enough for time to work with you, not against you. The reason consistency is hard is because it's quiet. It doesn't offer the same emotional highs that intensity does. It asks for patience in a world that glorifies urgency. We're surrounded by people who want results now, recognition now, rewards now, but consistency doesn't work that way. It demands faith. You have to believe that what you're doing today, even if it feels small or insignificant, is moving you toward something meaningful tomorrow. And that's the hard part, because in the beginning, consistency rarely shows results. You can work out for a week and see nothing. You can save money for a month and it barely adds up. You can practice a skill for months and still feel mediocre. And that's when most people give up, not because it doesn't work, but because they stop before it does. They mistake invisibility for ineffectiveness. Growth is invisible before it's obvious. Seeds grow roots before they sprout. Muscles strengthen before they show. Character develops in silence long before it's recognized. That's the hidden magic of consistency. It's working even when you can't see it. Every repetition is a deposit into a future you haven't reached yet. Every small effort compounds slowly and quietly until one day it bursts into something undeniable. Consistency also builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Every time you show up when you said you would, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on you. That's what builds real confidence. Confidence doesn't come from achieving results. It comes from knowing you'll keep showing up regardless of the outcome. You can't control how fast progress happens, but you can control whether you quit. And that control, that commitment, is what separates those who dream from those who do. Think of any craft, any art, any skill. The greats aren't defined by how intensely they work one day, they're defined by how consistently they worked every day. Writers don't become great by writing one perfect paragraph. They become great by writing imperfectly for years. Musicians don't master their art through one inspired performance. They master it through thousands of hours of deliberate practice. Athletes don't dominate because of one extraordinary game. They do it because of countless invisible mornings of repetition. Consistency is the foundation of mastery. You cannot be great at something you do occasionally. You can only be great at something you do repeatedly. And yet most people give up long before they reach that point. They let boredom win. They let fatigue win. They let the illusion of slow progress convince them that consistency doesn't matter. But consistency is not about instant gratification. It's about long-term transformation. There's a beautiful truth about consistency. It compounds. Just like interest in a bank account, small deposits made regularly turn into something massive over time. The catch is you have to stay in the game long enough to see the compounding effect. Every time you show up, even if you feel like you're making no progress, you're still building something. You're building habits. You're building resilience. You're building character. The people who make it are not the ones who never doubt themselves. They're the ones who keep going through doubt. They understand that motivation is temporary, but commitment is lasting. They don't rely on how they feel to decide whether to act. They act first, and the feeling follows. That's the essence of discipline. Discipline is not punishment, it's a form of self-respect. It's choosing what you want most over what you want now. Consistency also teaches humility. When you do something repeatedly, you come face to face with your own limitations. You learn patience. You learn that progress isn't linear. Some days you move forward, some days you fall back. Some days you feel unstoppable. Other days you feel stuck. But if you keep going, you realize that success isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. There's an old Japanese philosophy called Kaizen, which means continuous improvement. The idea is simple: get a little better every day, not dramatically better, just a little. Because small improvements, when repeated consistently, create remarkable results over time. That's what consistency does. It bridges the gap between where you are and where you want to be, one small step at a time. We often underestimate what we can achieve in a year because we overestimate what we can do in a day. We think consistency is boring, but it's the most powerful force in personal growth. The person who reads for 10 minutes every day will outlearn the one who reads for hours once a month. The person who saves a small amount consistently will outperform the one who invests sporadically. The person who exercises moderately but daily will outlast the one who trains intensely and burns out. Consistency beats intensity because it aligns with how real growth works. Gradually, incrementally, quietly, there's nothing flashy about it. You don't feel like a hero when you do it. But years later, when people see your results, they'll call you lucky, not realizing how many quiet days of effort built that luck. But there's another side to consistency. It's not just about discipline. It's also about compassion. Because to be consistent, you have to forgive yourself when you slip. You have to allow room for imperfection. You can't demand flawless execution from yourself every day. You just need to keep coming back. Consistency isn't about never falling, it's about never staying down. The person who succeeds is not the one who never fails, but the one who never stops trying. In relationships, consistency builds trust. In business, consistency builds credibility. In self-growth, consistency builds character. You can't fake it. You can't rush it. You can only earn it through repetition. People might admire intensity, but they depend on consistency. Because intensity impresses people once, consistency earns their faith forever. And perhaps the most important truth about consistency is that it compounds not only outcomes, but also identity. The more you do something, the more it becomes who you are. You start to see yourself differently. You begin to expect more of yourself. You begin to act like someone who doesn't quit because you've proven to yourself that you don't. That's how consistency transforms not just results, but people. At the core of it all, consistency is about trust, trust in the process, trust in time, and trust in yourself. It's about believing that even if the results aren't visible today, they are growing beneath the surface. You might not see them yet, but that doesn't mean they're not real. Growth is like the tide. You can't see it rise every second, but give it time and the change becomes undeniable. So if you ever feel like giving up because progress feels slow, remember this is supposed to feel slow. Real progress always does. The speed doesn't matter. The direction does. Because consistency is not about doing more, it's about doing enough every day until it becomes who you are. The ones who change their lives are not the ones who chase intensity. They're the ones who embrace consistency. They're the ones who understand that greatness isn't built in the moments of excitement, but in the hours of commitment. They're the ones who understand that success doesn't happen all at once. It happens little by little, choice by choice, day by day. In the end, the difference between people who dream and people who achieve comes down to one thing: consistency. Because when you commit to the process and stay the course, even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when it feels endless, something remarkable happens. You become unstoppable. You stop being driven by emotion and start being guided by purpose. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and start creating it. You stop needing motivation to act because the act itself becomes part of who you are. That's what consistency does. It transforms effort into identity. It turns ordinary people into extraordinary ones, not through flashes of brilliance, but through quiet, steady, relentless commitment. And one day, when people look at your success and call it overnight, you'll smile because you'll know the truth. It didn't happen overnight. It happened every night, every morning, every small, consistent step that no one else saw. That's how big changes are built. That's how legacies are written. Not in the moments of intensity, but in the rhythm of consistency. Your environment is more powerful than your motivation. We like to believe that we are the masters of our own decisions, that our willpower and determination are enough to shape our future. But the truth is, our surroundings shape us far more than we realize. Who we spend time with, what we see every day, the spaces we live and work in, all of it silently molds our habits, our mindset, and ultimately our destiny. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And your systems are built inside your environment. If you want to grow, you must design the world around you to support that growth. It's not just about trying harder, it's about making it easier for the right habits to happen and harder for the wrong ones to survive. We often think of success as an act of will, pushing ourselves against resistance, fighting distractions, forcing discipline. But what if success isn't about fighting harder? What if it's about rearranging your environment so that growth becomes the path of least resistance? That's the quiet genius of environmental design. It turns your surroundings into silent allies. Look at anyone who has achieved long-term change, and you'll find that they didn't just change their mindset, they changed their environment. They surrounded themselves with people who pushed them higher. They removed the temptations that pulled them down. They crafted spaces that reminded them every day of what they stood for. Growth became easier not because they became superhuman, but because they built conditions that supported it. The mistake most people make is assuming they can thrive in an environment that contradicts their intentions. They want focus but live in constant noise. They want positivity but surround themselves with negativity. They want discipline but fill their spaces with distraction. Then they wonder why progress feels impossible. It's not because they lack motivation, it's because they are trying to grow in soil that doesn't nourish them. A plant doesn't blame itself for not growing in the dark. It doesn't scold itself for not blooming in poor soil. It simply needs light, space, and care. Humans are no different. You can't grow in an environment that suffocates your potential. You can't become your best self in a space built for your worst habits. Change the soil and the growth follows naturally. Our environment communicates with us constantly, even when we're not aware of it. Every object, every sound, every person sends signals to our brain. The phone on your desk says, check me. The snacks in the cupboard whisper, take a break. The messy workspace signals chaos. The inspiring book on your table says, learn. The photo of your family says, remember why you're doing this. Every one of these signals either pushes you forward or pulls you back. When you begin to take control of those signals, everything changes. The small act of placing a water bottle on your desk reminds you to hydrate. Keeping your running shoes by the door nudges you to move. Turning off notifications makes space for focus. Surrounding yourself with people who talk about ideas instead of complaints raises your standard of thinking. You don't have to force growth. Your environment becomes the reminder. There's a famous story about a school that wanted to improve student health. Instead of telling kids to eat healthier, they simply rearranged the cafeteria. They placed fruits and vegetables at eye level and moved sugary snacks out of sight. Within weeks, healthy choices increased dramatically. Nothing about the students changed, not their knowledge, not their willpower, only their environment. That's how powerful design is. When we change the context, behavior follows naturally. The problem is, most of us try to rely on internal strength in environments built for weakness. We try to resist temptation instead of removing it. We try to force focus instead of creating it. But discipline isn't about saying no all the time. It's about creating a life where you don't need to. There's a quiet wisdom in making good habits obvious and bad habits invisible. Want to read more? Put the book on your pillow so it's the last thing you see at night. Want to use your phone less? Leave it in another room when you work. Want to exercise? Pack your gym bag the night before. The environment becomes your coach. Silent, reliable, and always present. But environment isn't just physical, it's emotional. The people we spend time with have the power to either expand or limit our vision. If you spend your days around people who complain, who criticize, who talk about how hard life is, your own energy begins to match theirs. But if you surround yourself with people who challenge you, who remind you of what's possible, who hold you accountable to your potential, you rise to their level. There's an old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Growth is not a solo pursuit. We are social creatures wired for connection. The people we keep close shape our standards, our language, and our sense of what's normal. That's why the environment of community matters as much as the environment of space. If you want to grow, find people who believe in growth. If you want to stay inspired, find people who live with purpose. But here's the deeper truth. Designing your environment for growth requires courage, because it means you must sometimes walk away from environments that no longer serve you. That might mean distancing yourself from negativity, leaving comfort zones, or stepping into spaces where you feel uncomfortable, not because you don't belong, but because you're growing. Growth is never comfortable, but it's always honest. Sometimes the hardest part of transformation isn't learning something new, it's unlearning what no longer fits. It's letting go of spaces, routines, or relationships that anchor you the past. That doesn't mean you abandon people, it means you choose alignment. You choose to spend your limited energy in environments that help you become more of who you were meant to be. Think about this: when you're in a cluttered space, your mind feels cluttered. When you walk into a clean, calm room, you breathe easier. When you spend a few minutes in nature, you feel grounded again. That's not coincidence, it's design. Your environment doesn't just reflect your state of mind, it shapes it. So if you want clarity, simplify your space. If you want focus, remove distractions. If you want inspiration, fill your world with things that remind you of why you started. Even small environmental cues can rewire the way you think. A quote on the wall, a daily routine checklist, a gratitude journal by your bedside, these aren't just decorations, they're anchors. They remind your brain of your values, your vision, your goals. Because we are forgetful creatures. We lose sight of what matters when life gets noisy. A well-designed environment gently pulls us back. And yet, we rarely pause to ask, what messages is my environment sending me right now? Does it inspire me or drain me? Does it make it easy to do what's right and hard to do what's wrong? Or the other way around. Every environment is either pushing you closer to your goals or pulling you away from them. The challenge is to make that influence conscious. When you walk into a space that reflects your future self, something inside you shifts. You start to act as if you already are that person. You start to align your behavior with that identity. You begin to feel worthy of growth because your surroundings mirror your potential. That's the subtle but profound power of design. It allows you to step into your next chapter before you've fully arrived. Sometimes the most powerful form of motivation isn't a speech or a book. It's walking into a room that reminds you who you're becoming. The environment becomes a story about your values. A space filled with learning materials tells the story of curiosity. A workspace free of distraction tells the story of discipline. A home filled with gratitude and intention tells the story of purpose. You don't just live in your environment lives in you. It's easy to underestimate this truth because change in environment feels external. But every external shift creates an internal response. When you surround yourself with order, your mind finds peace. When you surround yourself with inspiration, your heart finds courage. When you surround yourself with people who expect more of you, you begin to expect more of yourself. So if you're feeling stuck, don't start by asking, what's wrong with me? Start by asking, what around me is keeping me here? Because sometimes the problem isn't you, it's the environment. That rewards staying the same. The good news is you can redesign it. One small change at a time, move one object. Change one routine. Create one reminder. You don't need a full renovation of your life. Just a few intentional adjustments that make growth inevitable. Because when your environment is aligned with your purpose, you no longer have to fight so hard to be your best self. The world around you begins to lift you up instead of pulling you back down. And that's when growth becomes natural. You stop forcing it. You stop pushing so hard. You simply live in an environment that reflects who you are becoming, and that alignment makes all the difference. Because the truth is, no one succeeds in isolation. Every great story of transformation is also a story of alignment between belief and behavior, between purpose and practice, between self and environment. When your environment supports your growth, your effort multiplies. You no longer rely on willpower alone, you rely on design. So look around you. Ask yourself what version of you your environment is designed to support. If the answer doesn't match who you want to become, don't wait for motivation. Redesign the space, redesign your circle, redesign your routine. Because you can't build a new life in the same environment that built the old one. Change the environment and the change will follow. And one day, when you walk into your space and feel a sense of calm, purpose, and clarity, you'll realize it wasn't your willpower that transformed your life. It was your environment working with you, not against you. That's when growth becomes effortless. That's when success becomes sustainable, because the secret to becoming your best self isn't just within you, it's around you. We live in a world obsessed with the big moments. The promotions, the milestones, the trophies, the applause. But the truth is, the big moments aren't what change our lives. The small ones do. The quiet steps we take when no one is watching. The decisions we make on ordinary days. The moments we choose to keep going when the world gives us no reason to. That's where transformation begins. The greatest mistake we make when pursuing growth is waiting to celebrate until we've arrived. We tell ourselves, when I hit that goal, I'll feel proud. When I lose that weight, I'll be happy. When I achieve success, I'll finally relax. But that mindset robs us of joy, motivation, and meaning. Because life isn't built from grand achievements. It's built from small victories stacked one on top of the other. Celebrating micro wins isn't just about feeling good. It's about wiring your brain for progress. Every time you acknowledge a small win, you reinforce the belief that you're moving forward. And that belief, that sense of progress, is what keeps you going when the journey feels long and uncertain. Think about how we train a muscle. You don't lift a heavy weight once and suddenly become strong. You build strength through small, consistent repetitions. Each rep may not feel significant, but together they create transformation. Growth works the same way. It's the small daily acts of discipline, courage, and consistency that compound over time into something extraordinary. But the problem is, most of us are blind to our small wins. We downplay them. We tell ourselves they don't matter because they aren't dramatic enough. It's just a tiny step, we say. It's not the real thing yet. But those tiny steps are the real thing. They're the foundation of every great story. The person who loses 50 pounds doesn't do it in one leap. They do it one healthy meal, one workout, one choice at a time. The entrepreneur who builds a thriving business doesn't start with success. They start with a single idea and the courage to act on it. The human brain is wired to focus on what's missing rather than what's been gained. It's a survival mechanism. Our ancestors needed to notice threats to stay alive. But in modern life, that same wiring keeps us trapped in a loop of dissatisfaction. We finish a task and immediately think about what's next. We hit a milestone and immediately raise the bar. We forget to pause and say, I'm proud of that. And when we forget to celebrate, progress starts to feel meaningless. Acknowledging small wins isn't arrogance, it's gratitude. It's taking a moment to honor the effort that went into doing something hard, even if it's just showing up when you didn't feel like it. Because showing up is a win. Pushing through discomfort is a win. Trying again after failing is a win. And when you learn to recognize these moments, you begin to see that you are already succeeding in ways you've never given yourself credit for. There's a simple truth about human motivation. What gets recognized gets repeated. When you reward yourself for making progress, your brain learns that the effort is worth it. That creates momentum. And momentum is more powerful than motivation because momentum doesn't depend on how you feel. It builds its own energy. Imagine a small snowball at the top of a hill. At first, it's tiny and fragile. It barely moves, but with each roll, it gathers more snow. It gets heavier, faster, unstoppable. That's how success works. Every micro win adds weight, adds speed, adds confidence. Soon, the progress you once had to force becomes natural. The same principle applies in every part of life: relationships, health, career, learning, personal growth. You can't jump from nothing to mastery, but you can celebrate the steps that take you there. The first time you wake up early instead of hitting snooze, that's a win. The first time you speak up in a meeting even though you're nervous, that's a win. The first time you say no to something that drains you, that's a win. These moments may seem small, but they're signs that you're changing your story. Too often, We dismiss these moments because no one else notices them. But growth isn't about being seen, it's about becoming. It's about knowing that every quiet, uncelebrated effort is shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more disciplined than you were yesterday. When you learn to celebrate micro wins, you train yourself to live in the present rather than constantly chasing the future. You begin to find meaning in the process instead of waiting for the outcome. That's where fulfillment lies. Not at the finish line, but in the steps along the way. It's the same reason athletes celebrate practice sessions, not just championships. The repetition, the training, the sweat, those are micro wins that build mastery. The championship is only possible because of the hundreds of unseen victories that came before it. There's something profoundly human about taking a moment each day to reflect and say, I did something good today. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe you stayed calm when you could have exploded. Maybe you read a few pages of a book instead of scrawling. Maybe you made a small act of kindness. Maybe you didn't quit. That's enough. Because the person who learns to celebrate small wins also learns to stay motivated when progress is slow. We tend to think that success comes from massive leaps, from dramatic moments of courage and risk. But in reality, it's the accumulation of small wins that prepares us for those big leaps. When you've spent months or years stacking small victories, the big moment doesn't overwhelm you. It feels like the natural next step, because deep down, you've built the identity of someone who can handle it. The act of celebrating micro wins also shifts your relationship with failure. When you focus on small victories, setbacks don't feel catastrophic anymore. You start to see that even in failure, there's progress. You begin to recognize that trying again after falling down is a win, that learning from a mistake is a win. That having the courage to keep showing up when it's hard is a win. This perspective is what separates those who burn out from those who last. The people who endure don't do so because they never fail. They endure because they find joy in the small moments along the way. They know that every little step counts, that every effort, no matter how small, moves them forward. Let's be honest, we're all chasing something. Success, love, meaning, peace. But if you can't appreciate the small progress, you'll never feel satisfied even when you achieve the big goal. Because there will always be another goal waiting. The finish line keeps moving. True success isn't found in reaching a destination, it's found in enjoying the journey toward it. So how do we start celebrating micro wins? We start by paying attention. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what went well today? Not what went wrong, not what you still have to do, but what went right. Maybe it's just one thing. Maybe it's tiny. Write it down, smile about it. Feel proud of it. That simple act rewires your brain to look for progress instead of problems. You can also share your micro wins with others, not to brag, but to reinforce gratitude and connection. When you tell someone, I made a small step today, you inspire them to notice their own. You create a ripple effect, because when we learn to celebrate small progress together, we build cultures in families, teams, communities where growth feels safe and sustainable. In workplaces, this mindset transforms everything. When leaders recognize small efforts, people feel seen, they feel valued. And when people feel valued, they give more of themselves. It's not the bonus check or the award that drives engagement. It's the acknowledgement of progress. It's hearing, I see what you did there. That mattered. That's what fuels loyalty, creativity, and trust. The same is true in personal growth. When you recognize your own micro wins, you begin to build a relationship of trust with yourself. You stop seeing yourself as a project that needs fixing and start seeing yourself as a person who's evolving. You start to believe that you're capable of change because you have proof, small, tangible proof that you're already changing. Celebrating micro wins also brings joy back into the process of becoming. Because life isn't meant to be a constant sprint toward what's next. It's meant to be lived, to be felt savored and appreciated. When you pause to celebrate, you allow gratitude to fill the space where stress once lived. You reconnect with the reason you started. You remind yourself that progress is happening right here, right now. So many people give up not because they aren't capable, but because they fail to notice how far they've come. They mistake slow progress for no progress. But if you look closely, you'll see you're not where you were last month. You're not the same person you were a year ago. You've grown, you've learned, you've endured, you've taken steps, even if they were small ones. That's worth celebrating. When we learn to see progress in every step, something magical happens. The journey stops feeling like a burden. It starts to feel like a privilege. Every small win becomes a reminder that you're alive, that you're trying, that you're capable of change. And that's the most powerful motivation there is. So don't wait for the world to celebrate you. Celebrate yourself Not when you've arrived, but while you're still becoming. Because life isn't made up of the few big wins that everyone sees. It's made up of thousands of micro wins that no one else notices but you. And those tiny moments, strung together with purpose and persistence, become the masterpiece of your life. You don't need to do something extraordinary to deserve celebration. You just need to keep showing up, keep trying, keep believing that every small effort matters. Because it does. Over time, those small efforts compound into something unrecognizable, something beautiful, something big. And when you look back one day, you'll realize the big change you were chasing didn't happen all at once. It happened in the smallest of moments, the ones you chose to honor, appreciate, and celebrate along the way. Because the truth is simple, small wins aren't just steps toward the goal. They are the goal. They're proof that you're moving, growing, becoming. And that in itself is worth celebrating every single day.